This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask with your host, Dr. Judith Briles. On the show today, you'll find out where book publishing is going and how to take advantage of it. How to identify and avoid publishing predators. What opportunities are emerging as the book trade evolves in new forms. How to avoid losing money and much, much more. Join us now as a variety of publishing pros will deliver insights and strategies to take the author to the next level of publishing. It's your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. Brought to you by AuthorU and the Book Shepherd. And now, here's your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of AuthorU, your guide to book publishing. Throughout it, I'm going to share ahas, insights, and tips to enhance and support your book publishing journey, along with my guest, of course. My goal is always to support you and your book success, so let's get started. And today, we have Randy Peyser with us, and Randy has lots of hats that she wears. Number one, she ghostwrites books. She helps edits books, and she's a deal maker. She likes to get books and authors deals with literary agents and publishers. And primarily, this is for a lot of you would have an interest, she works with newbie authors, first-time authors. They've been featured on the Hallmark TV and Daily Mail TV, in Oprah Magazine, Time Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, USA Today's bestseller list, along with airport bookstores, FedEx offices, and Office Max stores. One book was just optioned for a Hollywood film. She's the author of Crappy to Happy, as featured in the movie Eat, Pray, Love, The Power of Miracle Thinking, and the Write a Book program. So, Randy, welcome to the program. Where do we start?
Thank you very much, Judith.
There's so much. There's so much that we can go down the path. I think that one of the things, like I will be mentioning it. I should say I mentioned it in last week's easing. One of my authors, Deb Shepard, who is a medium, actually had a pilot made for a possibility of a reality show, TV show. And they put it all together themselves. I'm sure that it would have been a heck of a lot easier if someone like you had been in play as well. But a lot of authors do fantasize. They believe, they've been told that their book should be a movie. I bet you've heard that a zillion times.
Yes, I have. And there's a path when somebody's publishing through a traditional publisher. The path typically is that the book has to sell well, and then it can be sold to film. So at least from the book side of things, that's how it works.
So I guess what we all need to say, all of you, is you all need to be building your credibility and your influence and your book sales if you want to get the attention of the big screen. Is that safe to say?
That's very, very true. Like, I refer people to script writers. Like, I tell people my lane is really get the content right, get the book sold to a traditional publisher. That's what I do. But of course, I have referral partners and, people like one of the women I refer people to for scripts. She's done 150 scripts for TV and Netflix and film that have been sold. So, somebody like that obviously understands what the producers look for and buy, and but it doesn't come with an inexpensive price tag. That's for sure. When you have industry professionals at that level.
Exactly. So they know how to write the hook to grab them, is what you're saying. So you said the price. What kind of price range are you thinking of? What are we talking about here?
The Writers Guild of America, which is what this particular writer is a member of, charges a going rate of $250,000.
Whoa!
And she also told me, this is, an industry like the publishing industry as well. That's, it's run on relationships and the power of relationships. So, every author I know who's written fiction, and a lot of memoir authors as well, they see their book on the screen. That's That's their big vision.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that every fiction author and memoir writer feels the same way, typically. And so the competition is very, very high. So how do you stand out, whether it's in the publishing world or in the film world? What can you do to stand out? Because that's critically important. As you mentioned, the credibility factor.
Oh yeah, so maybe that path we should kiss on, and some of the things they could do. I know I'm a nonfiction writer for my own books. I finally did my own memoir. Have I then told people that, boy, this would be a great movie? No, I don't care. I'm not going to worry about that. I just don't care about that.
And it's very interesting that you're bringing that up, because I just had a memoir that has been optioned for Hollywood film. And it's a book I edited. It came out in 2019 called Slave, The Human Trafficking Survivor Finds Life. And it's such a phenomenal story. Even as I was editing it, I said, oh, my God, I just see this book going to film. And sure enough, publisher just called. I'd sold it to a publisher. And, she just contacted me a few months ago and said, it's just been optioned.
Well, that's pretty exciting. So you've mentioned publishers a couple of times. I mean, I those who have listened to me for years know that 18 of my 37 books were with New York. And then I broke away and created my own firm, publishing house, because I got how to do all this. And I made a heck of a lot more money, too. But the reality is that there's still that dream out there. And what kind of stats can you give us on the latest of what you know of? What percentages of books are getting picked up?
My percentage rate, I'm just going to be honest. I'm not here to, really self-promote or anything, but I'm just going to be incredibly honest. In nonfiction, I sell 99%. I would say 99.5% of anything I agree to pitch. And, why is that? And it's because I understand what the publishers buy, and I understand what the agents look for. And so I tell people that it really comes down, there's two parts to the conversation to get a book deal. And one part has to be about, the first part has to be about your content. Is it relevant? Is it timely? Do you own a lane? Are you contributing something to a conversation that's already happening, but it's very, very uniquely positioned? So, and is there a market that's established that is going to be interested in that book? For example, one of the big buzzwords in the publishing industry, and I heard this right out of the mouth of an acquisitions editor at McGraw-Hill. I was doing a Zoom call with my client. They were offering $17,500 advance on a book that we ultimately got $125,000 for in a bidding war. And Simon & Schuster took it. It was a big bidding war between 12 publishers. But this acquisitions editor said something that I've heard from other publishers as well, in these exact words. And she said, I'm looking for outcome-driven titles, outcome-driven content. And then she defined that. She said, what I'm looking for are books that are going to take the readers from point A to point B with all the steps in between. So by the time the reader finishes reading the book, they can actually apply something and do something differently. So you may have the clever title, the witty title. It doesn't matter. For example, my first book came out close to 20 years ago, and my original title was called From Crappy to Happy, A Journey Out of the Pits and Into the Fruit of Life. And I thought, gee, that's witty. Publishers are going to love that. But 21 years ago, I was a newbie. And so the marketing department gets a hold of the book, and they're the ones who understand what readers buy. And that's, the critical piece. And so they changed my title. First, they took the from away, and it became Crappy to Happy. Now listen to what they did with the subtitle, Small Steps to Big Happiness Now. And so following every story from my life, because that particular book was memoir, here's a crappy experience I went through, here's how I turned it around and transformed it. But after every single story, there are 4 steps to happiness now, which answers the reader's question that's going on in their mind, which we all have to answer, regardless of whether the book is fiction or nonfiction or anything, which is, what's in it for me? That is the bottom line. So when people are writing memoir, for example, I tell people, make it prescriptive memoir. So following every single story, there are steps. For example, after each of my stories, there are 4 steps to happiness now, which are either insights or action steps. Insights or action steps. That's critical. So that's just a little bit about the first part of the conversation, which is about your unique differentiation. The second part, to get a book deal. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. We have 2 minutes to our first break. Just wanted to let you know. Okay. Go ahead. Step 1.
Okay.
Step 1 we got. All right.
Okay. So then the other part of the conversation is what I call the business of publishing, because it's not typically, a mom and pop operation. I'm dealing with the larger publishers, and these are corporate decision makers. And the business of publishing has to do strictly with numbers. And of course, Judith, I'm sure you would know this as well. So who are the people getting book deals? People who are highly visible. You must be visible. You must be active on social media. I was doing some pitching via Zoom. And so I'm pitching this acquisitions editor, and she's looking at a computer on another desktop computer. And as I'm pitching my authors, she's looking them up on Facebook or LinkedIn, and she's saying things like, oh, their numbers look strong, but the amount of engagement they have is way too low. Click next. And that's largely how they're making their decisions, based on how many people are you reaching currently? How many eyeballs do you have on you, especially virtually now? And
and I have a lot of comments on that whole the engagement thing, which is so hard in many cases to do unless you're paying for ads or you're doing some really oddball things to get other people involved. But let's come back to that. We're going to take our first break. This is Randy Peyser. We are talking really books, moving you on to the next level and step. I'm Judith Briles.
This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask, with your host, Dr. Judith Briles. And we'll be right back with more great information right after these.
Is there a book in you or another? AuthorU shows you how to create, develop, and publish your book without being hoodwinked. If you already have a book out, you will find a supportive and brainstorming community that is connected and creative, no matter where you live. AuthorU brings in national experts for its book camps and annual AuthorU extravaganza. It has regular meetings and delivers webinars for its members on timely topics. Through AuthorU's extensive network, members enjoy exclusive benefits, including significant discounts for a variety of services necessary to publishing. AuthorU is the premier authoring resource in the country, creating community, education, guidance, vision, and success for the serious author. If you want to create a book that has pizzazz, punch, and panache, AuthorU is for you. Timely author and publishing tips and articles are posted on its social media platforms, and it is free. Discover AuthorU, where authors go to become seriously successful. Join AuthorU today at AuthorU.org.
Welcome back to your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. If you want to write and publish a book, if you want to be successful as an author, your guide to book publishing, everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask, is for you. Stay tuned and you'll hear about statistics, scenarios, and strategies on what to do now to get you published. So let's get back to the show. And here again is your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
Hi there, this is Judith. Back with me is Randy Peyser, and you can find out where she hangs her hat at AuthorOneStop.com. But one of the little tidbits she just really threw out as we went to our first break is what's happening, and this is normal. This is so normal that if they don't have two computers in front of you, if you're pitching yourself, and I don't care if it's media, I don't care if it's to a potential agent, I don't care if it's to a book club, I don't care who it is to. They are already checking out who and what you are and about. So they may have another computer, they can do it and check stats on you or see what you've written or what your latest blog is, or they're on their mobile. But understand there's a double dip going on anytime you put yourself out as the expert, the one, the person to bring in as a speaker, etc. You would say that was true, Randy?
It's very true. And Judith, I'd love to share the kinds of numbers that publishers are looking for and kind of ways to circumvent it. Ways to circumvent this because, people start listening and they go, oh my God, I don't have those numbers and therefore, I'm doomed for a traditional publishing contract. And that's absolutely not true. So I want to talk about the ways that I've discovered that we can actually circumvent it. So I had one author. The book is called The Prepared Investor. I did sell it. It wound up, it just came out in February of 2021. And the author had 2 LinkedIn profiles. So obviously his demographic is LinkedIn. And so he had 10,000 people on his business profile and 1,000 people on his personal profile. And I had 25 meetings in New York. This was like slightly before COVID times. I had 25 live meetings, 22 meetings with publishers, 3 with top literary agents, all separate meetings. And those 3 agents said the exact same words in these separate meetings. They said, delete 1,000. Those numbers are too small. But I did sell that book based on 10,000 followers. So minimally, I tell people, aim for 10,000 followers in a category. Now, some of the ways that I've circumvented this is that I had some authors, it was a Mind, Body, Spirit project, and they did a GoFundMe campaign, and they had 450 pre-sales. Now, 450 pre-sales isn't like 10,000 books or, a large number. But I was pitching the top Mind, Body, Spirit publisher in the world, and I decided, and I know their criteria. Their criteria is that, because I was sitting with them in New York, and they told me they're looking for authors who have an email list of 100,000 people, and they examine the open rate on that email. So again, these are very, very high numbers, and a lot of people are going to moan and groan and say, God, I'm not anywhere near that, and I probably never will be. However, I had these Mind, Body, Spirit authors who had pre-sold 450 products. And in their case, it was actually an Oracle deck. And so I decided, I've written the book proposal, it's polished, it's ready to go. I'm going to pitch it to this top publisher. All they can do is say no, right? So I pitched it at 9 a.m. on a Thursday via email. By 9:20 a.m., the publisher emailed me back and said, this project looks stunning. Let me get back to you. The next day, their acquisitions editor contacts me. I want to set up a meeting with the authors. So that was Friday, and on Monday we had that meeting. And so had the authors met that criteria of 100,000 people? No. But did we have proof of sales for 450 books right out the bat? Yes. And it opened the door.
I am a huge believer of pre-sales. Huge believer. That's how I would test the market when I was out speaking all over the country. That's how I test the market. Is this the right book? Is this title fit? Is this that? And when I did a pre-sale, and I actually started pre-saling sometimes before I ever wrote the book, Randy, I was just testing. And that I would come back, I do that 6 months before, that I would have a minimum of 400 to 500 pre-sales at full price. And people I had checks. People were paid. They were a done deal. And so I knew, because I had my own printing company, my own publishing company by then, that I had already paid for a print run of 3,000 books with those sales.
Yep, that's perfect. And then I have another suggestion for authors, and this is something that everybody can do as well, but it comes with a caveat. And so one of the ways, because you just mentioned, Judith, about testing the market, and one of the ways to do that I think is a very successful way is to reach out to people and ask them for feedback just on your first page. And so the way this works is that I was giving a talk for the High Sierra writers in Reno, Nevada. There were about 60 people in the room, and I was speaking about how to get a book deal with a publisher, because that's what I speak about. And after my talk, I love this, and I'd never seen anybody do this before. The host of the meeting asked people for their first pages. And this is something they do for every meeting, so people are aware of what that means. And so about 10 people had given their first pages of their novels, of whatever they were writing, and anonymously. And so he read the first line of each one and said, and just asked his audience, here's, 60 people who don't know whose book that is, and asked them, based on this line, would you read this first page? And a certain amount of hands went up. Then he read the first paragraph. Based on this paragraph, would you continue reading? And then, a bunch of hands went up. And then he, read the next paragraph. Hands went down. And so he asked the audience, why, for those of you who put your hand down, what made you stop? So the author got real-time feedback, anonymously. And I thought that was so brilliant. Then I thought, well, what if you, as the writer, send out your first page, and the caveat is make sure it's polished and edited. Do not send it out just willy-nilly before you've really had it professionally edited. So once that first page is really clean, it's really polished, it's edited, send it out to your list and ask people, would you be willing to give me feedback on this first page? And most people, they want to be nice, and so they don't want to say anything hurtful. But you want real feedback. So the way to do it is set it up as a multiple choice, something like that, or tell people you're looking to understand the strengths and weaknesses of your piece. And so that gives people permission to tell the truth. And so any person who responds to you, this is somebody who right now is caring about your success. And that's your initial list. You can even, as a thank you for receiving the feedback, say, would you like to receive a notification when the book is going to come out? Would you be interested in buying this book? You can ask whatever questions you want. But all of a sudden, you have a cold, C-U-L-L-E-D, not C-O-L-D, a cold list. Does that make sense, Judith?
Well, I would call it a warm list at that point.
A warm list, yeah.
I would go into a warm list.
Okay.
Actually, Randy, we're doing, knock on wood. You can hear everyone hear me knocking on wood. That we actually have a live event, the AuthorU extravaganza coming up October 1st and 2nd, and that we're going to have the author Kong show. When they got Konged. The Dong show that they got just banged and the gonging, and that they had. This is for only unpublished works. Now they should have it polished. It better be edited, but it's going to be read on that, and then that all my speakers are going to be the judges, and they're going to all have they have all little cards and stuff, like auction cards, to when to stop. And sometimes that stop will happen on that first line. So it's so important. What you're saying is so hot because it's so important. Do you engage them from the get-go? Do you take them there? Are they there? Can you maintain it through the first paragraph? Can you maintain it through the second paragraph? Because here's the secret, everybody. If you're trying to pitch to an agent and if you can't maintain some momentum, you are in the trash can. Isn't that safe to say, Randy?
I would say that's very, very true. I've attended a lot of speed dating events, like in New York, the Writers Digest conferences, things like that. You have to know how to pitch. You just do.
Yeah, and And they don't.
No.
When you're pitching, they don't care about your dog Fluffy unless Fluffy's the main character.
That's right. They don't care about your husband and your children and where you live. They just don't. So you got to bottom line it.
Oh, yes. So it goes back to really your wonderful concept. You're going through the buzzword that it has to be outcome driven and deliver the content. Period.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
There's a mistake that I see authors make that I really want to address because it's so important. And it has to do with doing things out of sequence. So, for example, I'll have authors who come to me who say, I've been querying agents, I'm not getting any results. And, at least one person got back to me out of 90 and said, thank you for sending it, but I don't even hear anything. And I'll say such things as, has your book been analyzed? No. Has it been edited professionally? No.
Yeah.
Doesn't the agent do that? So doing things out of sequence. It's critical to getting interesting, to getting a book deal, to do things in the right sequence. And so for nonfiction, that is, have that book read and analyzed. I mean, that's what we do, right off the bat. The first thing we're going to do is just read through that manuscript and use the comments bar in Word to point out anything that feels that it needs to be strengthened. And we're also discerning in that first round, do we think this book is potentially sellable just based on content alone?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's critical.
Yeah, the old, and I came from the old days, Randy, and we're about 30 seconds from our next break, but I came from the old days that we just turned in our manuscript editing. You got what? Really? That's what they do. That's what they like the idea, and it is so evolved that you need to have your manuscript edited before you turn it in to. Because
the competition is so high.
Yeah.
It's got to be polished. It's got to be stellar. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. When we come back, I would love to have you let's do some kissing on. Let's talk about endorsements. Let's talk about some of these more mistakes that these authors make. And I think we need to, besides making that decision, do you pitch to New York, which I always say is plan A. If plan A doesn't work, you better have plan B, which is, okay, are you going to publish it? What do you need to know? Which I can talk about that. But let's get into some of those mistakes. And I'd like to get some more stats. We'll be right back.
This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles. And we'll be right back with more great information right after these.
Discover the power of you and your book at the Judith Briles Unplugged events. Each summer, Judith Briles Book Marketing Unplugged unfolds over 3 intensive days working with just Judith. You get publishing strategies, author and book platforms, book marketing panache and pizzazz, and authoring tools to take you and your book to rock star success. In the fall and winter, Judith Briles Speaking Unplugged includes Judith as your coach and mentor during 2 powerful days. You will learn how to structure a speech, how to create openings and closings, how to find gigs that pay you and sell your books, and you will get one-on-one coaching. Go to thebookshepherd.com and click on the Events tab to learn how to participate at the next Unplugged Workshop event.
Congratulations on getting your book published. The effort you put into your work is truly commendable. But what's next? What will happen to all the knowledge you have worked so hard to acquire to produce your book? Here at TogiNet Radio, we can provide you a platform to keep your knowledge working for you through the power of podcast. The subjects our podcasts cover are as varied as the grains of sand on a beach. From life coaching to military resources to business success, even to the paranormal. We have a place for everyone. To get started on your next step, call Scott at 903-787-5880 or email him at scott@ TogiNetRadio.com. That's SCOTT at TogiNetradio.com.
Welcome back to your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. Coming up, you'll hear more about statistics, scenarios, and strategies on what to do now to get you published. So let's get back to the show. And here again is your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
All right, with me is Randy Peyser, and we're talking about agents, kind of having an agent involved, and we're talking about pitching to New York, and we'll get into some of the pros and cons from her perspective of where we go with that in these areas. Now, and then also, Randy, we were on our 4 steps. Our first step was we needed to have good content, A to B. You had to understand the business of publishing, and one of the magnets is what your influence factor is as an author, that an agent, that an acquisition editor is looking for. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. You know, I call it the eyeball factor. Like how can I get, or an eyebrow factor, how can I get a publisher or an acquisitions editor eyebrows to raise up because they're so interested in that? It's like, oh my God, you know, what is the one thing that I can say in a pitch that absolutely gets those eyebrows up? Because then I know they're hooked.
That's exactly. Well, and so before we jump into, because I know we're all over the place, what would be, you have 2 more steps.
So doing things in the proper sequence, which means for nonfiction, which would be analysis, followed by editing, followed by book proposal, and then the pitch. So for all nonfiction, as you know, Judith, requires a book proposal, and a lot of people think that's a query letter. It's not.
Oh, no.
A book No. So the book proposal is the key to getting that book sold. And there's a page that I like to include in the book proposals that most people, or many people, do never include, and it's called sample appearances. And one of the things I like to do is have a single-spaced full page of sample appearances, which can be podcasts you've been on, articles you've written, wherever you've been visible in some way, and just flood that page, because that shows publishers and agents that you're serious and that you're visible.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just one of the pages. There are many different categories, and we have to prove the sale of your book in every category.
Well, it also has to prove too, because, dear authors, you need to understand, if you're going to go down, especially the traditional publishing route, I was blessed when I started out. They did all the marketing for me. It ain't that way anymore. They expect you to be a full-blown partner in marketing your work. They'll help a little, but you're going to have to be prepared. So they want to see that you've got credibility here, that you have been on podcasts, you have been involved in media, that there have been articles written about you, or you have put out. Would that be? Am I on the right track for you, Randy?
You know, absolutely. Like I work with a LinkedIn professional, because where are my people primarily? On LinkedIn. So it's not something you have to do entirely by yourself. Like Judith, you offer a suite of services, marketing related services. You know, so I highly encourage people to delegate, to work with people who are professionals in your space in social media.
Mm-hmm. But you also, I think it's so important. You got to learn some of this stuff. You can have virtual assistants to help you, you know, once you roll it out. But you got to start learning some of this stuff yourself. And like Randy said, that LinkedIn sounds to be one of your major channels. Is that correct, Randy? What I'm hearing?
That is correct. You know, for me, that's very correct. You know, I refer people to my LinkedIn specialist all the time, because he brought my numbers up from 2,371 people to now I'm over like 18,800 at the moment. Mm-hmm. So that's a huge jump.
Yeah, and I also need to say, for those of you with your toes just in the water, you're going to start with one. You're going to just start with one, and then it starts building, and then it starts building, and the momentum, but it's going to be based on what you're putting out there to hook people in to be interested in and all those things. And I know that when we started this podcast 6 years ago, my husband listened because he didn't want me to be alone. He said, I'll be your listener. All right, so now we have hundreds of thousands of listeners every month. And,
yes, and you built it.
And it's been built. It was not
Right.
overnight. And rarely those overnight successes, being discovered in the drugstore if you're an actress, for example, that is, so unusual that it's one step at a time. I just want to say that. Well, I think that a lot of people, Randy, you've talked about book proposals. I think a lot of people think it is just like a query letter. Book proposals are hard work. They're almost like writing a book.
I'd say that's true. One of the things that I do to help people, because I've seen, let me just back up. I'm a master of the book proposal. I wrote the book proposal that got that $125,000 deal. So, with the bidding war with 12 publishers, I know where those proposals need to be. So, and I see proposal writers that are charging, and you probably can confirm this, Judith. I see people charging with $7,000, $10,000, up to $30,000 to write proposals. Mm-hmm. And I have a very, very inexpensive alternative for my people. So what I do is that I have a real proposal. This proposal is actually 50 pages long that I polished for an author. And I pitched that book. Agent offered a deal in 1 day, sold the book in less than a week. FedEx office bought 3,000 copies of that book for their stores nationally.
Love that idea.
Yeah, so what I do is I sell that as a model so people can create their draft. And then I glance through the draft, and if I see any work that the author can do themselves, I just tell them. And then ultimately it'll come back to me for like a final polish. But it saves authors, thousands and thousands of dollars to do it this way. Because here's a, real proposal that it got an agent in 1 day and a publisher in less than a week. And so people use it as a model, because I always tell people I will never waste anyone's time or their money. I am not about that at all. Like you, I'm passionate about seeing people get their books out. And the book has to be stellar, and, I just provide a pathway to do that.
Which is a good idea. So you're talking about, okay, so I'm telling everyone, because I do what we were just talking about. I am already looking stuff up. She's mentioning this stuff. I am already on checking it out. And if there is a proposal in your midst, this is, Randy, what does it cost?
I charge $300 for the sample proposal and the template to fill out. Which is so people can just look from section to section. Oh, this is what goes here. Oh, this is what goes there.
Yeah.
And then I charge $150 an hour to polish proposals. And most proposals are going to take me about 6 hours.
All right.
As compared with $10,000 and $30,000.
Exactly. And back in my time when people were really thinking about it, and I'm talking over 30 years ago, it was not uncommon to drop $5,000 for a full-blown proposal to go to New York.
But that was years ago.
That's 3 decades ago. 3 decades ago. So in part of the, analysis, I'm going to recommend, number one, if this is your lane that you all want to go down, I would suggest you go to the AuthorOneStop.com, and if you click on services, you'll find it there on the proposal. I'm on your website. I'm doing double dipping too. Okay. So you would do that. I'm also going to recommend to you, this would be part of your analysis, I believe. I think it's always a good idea to see examples of proposals that have been floated around. They're modified. But one book I would recommend is Jody Rhine's book and Michael Larson's How to Write a Book Proposal, 5th edition. There are some real nuggets in there to get you start becoming into the world, and then look at doing the DIY. I'm going to call yours a DIY, Randy, that you you get into the templates, and then you may have a consulting time after that. So it really, you have that 1, 2, 3, but I think you need to understand the world of proposals, the who, what, where, when, and why. And because that's how I all started my books years ago. I mean, I became the master of writing my own proposals, as well as I became the master of, because often in publishing contracts was saying they had the right to your next book. And what if you didn't like this publisher? What if you did not want to do another book with them? What little things can you do to get them to reject you? And I learned how to do that. So just saying on that side of it. All right. So step three was really that you have to understand the proper sequence. And I think your mom isn't your editor, your sister isn't your editor, your best friend's not your editor, unless they are professional editors. You start with that. They can be readers, they can give you things back, but you need somebody else. They're not your focus group. You need someone else who's a player in here and understands what you need to have. And anyway, those people love you. They're not going to criticize. No.
That is true. Like every author who has ever come to me over 20 years who has said, I ran it by, and then they name their friends or contacts. Everybody loves it. I've never had one author in 20 years come back to me, not one, and say, they're telling me this isn't good. So professional services are so important. And, I want to share a little bit about that. Like, I have a team of editors who work for me, and my criteria is incredibly high. They had to have either worked directly for traditional publishers or have edited many books that have sold to these big traditional publishers. Why? If I wanted people who not only are great editors, but we understand what publishers look for, what they buy. And that's like the critical differentiation that I can offer. So, for example, when I have a fiction author come to me, my fiction editor is a former publisher from Simon & Schuster. It doesn't get better than that for fiction. And so when he gives the thumbs up on a manuscript, and he's given the thumbs up on 3 of them out of many that he's worked on, and saying, these are the 3 that are really, these are the ones that have legs. All 3 of those I've secured deals for. Because he knows exactly what a Simon & Schuster level publisher is going to buy, because he is one or was one. And so it's the same for me with all different genres. People who are absolutely at the top of their game.
And the other thing is there's a relationship that's built in trust. And with that, we're going to take our final break. We'll be right back.
This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles. And we'll be right back with more great information right after these.
Are you confused about publishing options? Do you know which printing option is best for your book? Does your stomach flip when you think about selling books? Or do you feel overwhelmed with what to do about book marketing and publicity? Get the answers and much more. Get them and from someone who knows publishing inside and out from both the traditional and independent sides how to make a successful book. You can't do it alone without paying the price. You can spend your money creating a book that turns out to be so-so, or you can create a book that looks and feels classy, builds your brand and platform, and is a success, a bestseller. It is your choice. You choose. If you want author and publishing success, you want Judith Briles as your book coach. Sign up for her weekly blogs and e-zine at thebookshepherd.com. The book shepherding concept is simple. The publishing world is changing, and so must you. You need an experienced shepherd and guide to collaborate with you as you create, strategize, develop, publish, and achieve your publishing goals. Publishing is riddled with obstacles. sometimes nightmares for the author, you do not need more problems. You want solutions. Dr. Judith Briles will shepherd you through the maze and chaos. At times, she has had to step in and rescue a book that has been sabotaged by a publisher, by a publishing service provider, and sometimes even by the author. If you want author and book success, connect with her today at thebookshepherd.com.
Welcome back to your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. If you want to write and publish a book, if you want to be successful as an author, your guide to book publishing, everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask, is for you. Stay tuned and you'll hear about statistics, scenarios, and strategies on what to do now to get you published. So let's get back to the show. And here again is your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
Alrighty, in our final segment with authorpreneur or advocate for authors and publishing, certainly Randy Peyser, and her website is AuthorOneStop.com, that we were going through these 4 steps before we kiss on a few other areas I want to go into in our final segment here. But the first was to make sure that you had your content. You know, and your book, the promise on your cover actually will take the content from point A to point B, and you meet that within the cover. The second is you need to understand the business of publishing, which includes is you got to be on social media, people, and you got to be some influence out there. Third is that understand that there is a proper sequence here of going back. You've got to do some analysis of the viability of your topic, your expertise, your product. You've got to get it edited. And if you're going to pitch to New York, you gotta have a book proposal. And then the 4th step, Randy, is what?
Well, let's talk specifically about pitching, because that's really about the 4th step. And because this is a world that is based on relationships, you've got to build relationships or work with someone who has those relationships in place. Because otherwise, it's just kind of like it's just really hard, because this world is based on relationships. For example, when I brought in, as I mentioned earlier, McGraw-Hill for a $17,500 advance on that particular book, and then all of a sudden Simon Schuster was coming into play, well, then I reached out to one of the agents I work with, and I didn't even write an email. I just wrote a subject line which read, "Linda, can you conduct this bidding war?" Linda, the agent, called me back within 10 minutes, and the next thing we know, she takes on the project, and there are now 12 publishers in this bidding war for that particular book. So it's really about establishing relationships or working with someone who has them. And that agent now, Linda, she said, "Randy, I hope you know I fast track every project you send to me." Why? Because a proven track record of sales.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about fast tracking. What does that mean?
Well, for me, that means that the majority of books I take in that I agree to pitch, the vast majority, I sell. I get contracts with either top agents or publishers.
All right. So when an agent tells you that, they're going to fast track it and put it at the top of the list and try to get it sold immediately. Is that correct?
What it means is they're going to read it they're going to put it at the top of their pile, because I've had agents who have told me, Randy, like one agent told me, "Randy, I'm getting over 1,000 submissions a month. I'm not even looking at my email. When you have something for me, text me first." Mm-hmm. So again, that's a relationship in place where I can say, "Paula, I've got a hot one. Look for XYZ in your email." Mm-hmm. That's opening doors that other people just cannot open.
Exactly. It is all about relationships. There's no question about it. How did I build these relationships? I'll tell you. 20 years ago, I started walking the floors of Book Expo America, which was the feeding frenzy in the United States for the entire publishing industry. Yep,
and I built up those connections year after year after year. Now, unfortunately, because of COVID And also because attendance at the book shows were going down, Book Expo America has ceased to exist. But the good news, for which I'm very grateful for, is that I have 20 years of connections built up. So now I can reach everybody I need to reach for any project, via email and Zoom.
Exactly. That's exactly right. All right. So I have a couple of quick questions I want to ask you. What's the number one thing that an author should absolutely not do if they want to get a publishing contract? Not do.
Self-publish. And here's the reason why. Because I have a lot of people coming to me and they've self-published their first book, and either they want that book picked up by a traditional publisher or they want the next book they've written to be picked up by a traditional publisher. And the problem is that Penguin Random House, Simon & Schuster size publishers, once you've self-published, they're going to look up your sales number on Amazon with their book scan software. Within 2 seconds, they will know your sales, even if you don't. And those large houses, they want to see 10,000 books sold in the first year. A mid-range publisher wants to see 3,500 to 5,000 books sold in the first year. And if your numbers aren't there, then they're going to consider you a bad investment. Agents won't touch it, and publishers won't touch it. So it's so much easier for me to get a book deal for a first-time author, which are people I primarily work with are first-time authors, when someone has no track record of sales than when someone has a track record of sales that doesn't meet their criteria.
All right. So I'm going to counter some of that because there is another thing. If you are someone who is out speaking, which is the number one way to sell books, I sold over 1 million copies with my mouth. That when you're out speaking, your sales are not going to be showing on a book scan, period. They're going to be shown by your print runs and the cases that you move. And that traditionally, I will tell you, I ordered, the very low order would have been 1,000 books. The average case, the AGI order I put in was 3,000 books at a crack. And we moved hundreds of thousands of books that way. It's back of the room. So if you're writing a proposal, by the way, this would be part of, if you're a speaker, if you're out there, you must have that information in there so they know on that. And also you want to have in your contract a really good discount if you're going to be reselling the books they publish because you become a buyer. And there's another little trick you can go behind, because I figured this one out too, everybody, that I had an account with Ingram, and I could, for any workshop, any event that I could do, I would order the books through Ingram to be delivered 200, 300 to an event I was at, and it would show as book sales. So there are things you can do. And then I've had experience where I've had publishers ask me, because of my old relationships with them, self-published book, did okay. But Warner Books at the time came around and offered $40,000. They just had a hole. This sounded like they were interested. $40,000 for a self-published book. So it can happen, but you've got to be strategic.
Very great advice.
So just saying.
I love it.
Yeah. So what Randy is saying is, though, that if your goal is to publish with New York, don't publish it on your own. Do the pitching and go through the process. And that is your plan A. For me, plan B would be, okay, I'm going to independently publish. I'm not talking about doing a POD, people. I'm talking about creating your own publishing house, understanding this is a P&L thing and a business and all that, and then go through that window. But that I think also is important, and I don't know, Randy, for you, if you have kind of a stats that you've looked at, how long it takes to connect, to do the pitch, to actually have a book in hand. I have no idea. But I think it's important to understand it's timing, that if you need a book out within a certain period of time, traditional may not be the way to go. You've got to do it the other way, but whatever you do, make sure you do it with quality. Make sure it's quality and it doesn't look like something that got slapped together at the kitchen table, which I've seen a lot of books like that.
I agree with that, Judith. I tell people I like self-publishing and traditional publishing for different reasons. I'm really not attached as to what people choose. I just want what's highest and best for each person. So typically what I tell people is if you want to make more money per book, typically self-publish, unless you're so large that there's the potential for, a large bidding war or something like that. You have, huge following already in place. So if you want to make more money per book, you want to get the book out quickly, as you mentioned, self-publish. If you're using the book for your career, definitely, this is what I tell people anyway, definitely try for a traditional publisher because more opportunities may open for you than with a self-published book. So, for example, my author is on, in top picks of Publishers Weekly or in Time Magazine or in Cosmo or Hallmark TV, those kinds of opportunities usually do not open up for self-published authors. So, but it's a longer, as you mentioned, it's a longer time. So, for example, I've had books that have sold in a week, as I mentioned earlier, but also a typical time frame is about 4 months for a publisher to say, yes, I want this book, or an agent to say, yes, I want this book. That's kind of typical. And then it's going to take minimally a year before that book comes out. And some publishers have a much longer time frame for a book to get out. So it really depends.
They say you should figure by the time you turn it in and it's accepted, you've gone to contract, you think 18 months is safe, but I'm seeing 2 years coming out as a stretch too. Fiction you can handle, but nonfiction, you got to look closely. And with that, Randy, thank you so much for being a guest today on AuthorU, your guide to book publishing. Thank you.
You're very welcome. It was fun.
Yes, it was, and we'd love to have you back again. So for all of you, thank you for sharing your time with me today on AuthorU, your guide to book publishing. I'm going to encourage you to go to our show page at bit.ly/book publishing podcast. From there, you can select from over 300 podcast episodes to learn and listen to. And for those of you who have been with me a long time, we don't do encore shows, meaning that we want to take a couple of weeks off, so we'll just run something we did, a couple of years ago. We always tape ahead so we can have something fresh for you every week. And with that said, I want to remind those that we actually are going to try to do a live, in-person AuthorU extravaganza here in Denver. It will be October 1st and 2nd. If you go to AuthorU.org, click on events, you can get all the details. We would love to see you here. Want to let you know you've got to be vaccinated to attend. Take care. We'll see you next week. Okay, thanks.
Thank you for being a part of Your Guide to Book Publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles.